Hi Arrows, I'm Kashawn and you are watching The Book Archer. Today we're talking all about audiobooks. Over the last few years, I've become a huge fan of audiobooks for their different reading experience and their convenience. At first, I was just going to talk about books that I really enjoyed on audio, but I feel like it's really important to talk about the different types of books that just make great audiobooks. So let's go ahead and start. One of the number one types of books that I would recommend listening to on audio are autobiographies or books that are narrated by the author. These make wonderful audiobooks to listen to. Whoever is narrating it wrote it. You really get to hear how did they want that character's voice to sound, what was the mood the author was going for, and you kind of get to enjoy those aspects of it. And if it's an autobiography, you really get to see like what points did the author really want to drive home, what part of their story did they want to put emphasis on. I've personally listened to a few. I know I've mentioned before I'm Going to Need More Wine by Gabrielle Union. Celebrity audiobooks are so fun to listen to because you're used to the narrator's voice. So hearing Gabrielle Union like reading her book, it felt like it was just a conversation between us and you really got to feel her emotion about certain life experiences. I personally read Black Privilege, but I heard that the audiobook is phenomenal by Charlemagne the God. If you listen to him on The Breakfast Club, and you enjoy him on The Breakfast Club, because some people don't enjoy Charlemagne, but if you do, that audiobook is probably a great one to check out just because he does radio every day where his voice is a tool. So listening to the audiobook, I imagine is probably very enjoyable. But yeah, books like that, books written by comedians, like anything like that, those are great ones to start with if you haven't listened to audiobooks before and you want to kind of jump in and see if you'll like them, because normally if you like the author or the narrator already, you're going to enjoy them telling their stories. The next type of books that I recommend are mysteries. Mysteries are perfect for audiobooks. There's a great way to set up like the atmosphere of a story when it comes to mysteries. There are actually a few audiobooks that I either could not finish or did not go on to the second one because I'm very scary. So listening to them on audio created so much atmosphere that I was like, oh, okay, I can't do this. But for people who enjoy that type of thing, then these are perfect for you. Like The Diviners, that is a phenomenal audiobook. I listened to a portion of it, the beginning portion, until I started to freak out. But it was so good. It's set during the 1920s and you get to hear like the way they speak and you get to hear the music and stuff in the background, but there's also a very scary villain and there's this good building up of anticipation and suspense, and it makes for a phenomenal read. So if you're not easily freaked out, that's one to check out. The Raven Boys by Maggie Steve Otter. The narrator does an amazing job, and I will talk about the narrator more when I make another one of these points, but oh my goodness, it creates such a unique feeling and vibe. From the very first sentence, from the very first page, you see what Maggie Steve Otter is going for in the story, and it immediately pulls you in. Whenever I listened to that audiobook, I felt like I was there. Another great one that I really would recommend is Carball by Stephanie Garber. I don't know what it is, but I feel like any type of circus or carnival or any of those type of elements make really good audiobooks. Then that book, people are always talk about how atmospheric it is anyway. Another great one to listen to on audiobook is stories that feature multiple perspectives or complex worlds. People's issues with books that take a lot of world building or books that have multiple characters, multiple perspectives, is that people find them hard to get into because there's so much information that you kind of have to consume and divulge and separate. And when you're listening to an audiobook, it's not as hard to do that. This one for me was definitely Three Dark Crowns by Kendar Blake, which by the way, that series, I'm caught up on it, is one of my favorite current fantasy YA series right now. I absolutely love it and enjoy it. A lot of people could not get into the first book because there are 3 main characters and they're all in 3 different kingdoms, so there's all supporting cast for each of those kingdoms. That was a lot for people to take in. but listening to it on audio, it just felt like I was listening to a play. You get to really understand the difference of each of the sisters' voices, and I absolutely loved listening to that one on audio. Another one that I really enjoyed on audio is the 1,000 Pieces of You trilogy. It has multiple dimensions, so it would be the same characters over and over, but it would be like different outcomes had happened in multiple dimensions. Dealing with infinite dimensions in a book and then they're going to different dimensions, that's a lot to keep up with. But listening to it on audio made it feel like I was just like watching some souped up sci-fi series. I would be listening to it in the car and it'd be like, ooh, what's happening next? What's happening next? I could really get involved with the action because I wasn't too busy trying to figure out like what dimension are they in right now? What's going on with the plot? If you are interested in reading a book but it has a large cast of characters, or it's time travel or something of that nature, check out the audiobook. Another one that I would suggest is an obvious one: big books or larger books. The physical tomes can really be intimidating for people to pick up because once you start reading it, you feel like you're never making progress. If the book is 900 pages and you're on page 200, you're like, sis, I'm not even a third way through this book. But when you're listening to it on audio, you don't actually physically see the book. I find on audio, I don't constantly check to see where I am in the story as much as I do in a physical book. It's very easy to just kind of get lost in the story, to not worry about how long the audio is. And if for some reason you want to pick up the pace, you can just move up how fast the narrator is talking. Those are just good ways to kind of get into those stories without having the pressure of you physically trying to quickly read a big book. A good one for this is Aragon. I listened to the first one on audio and I really enjoyed it. And not only that, but it had like extra like little fun music in the background. It set the tone, and that book was, I believe, over 500 pages. And I whipped through that in like a few days on audio, and it didn't even feel like it was a long book. It was very easy to enjoy. The next one is rereads. People are constantly talking about how they do not reread their favorite books, how they don't revisit them because they feel like their TBR piles are already too big and they don't have the time to. Nothing is better than rereading a book that you love on audio. Number one, you already know that you love the story. And number two, it doesn't take away from the time that you're physically reading a book. If it's a book that I would like to reread and I'm already reading a new book, I'll basically listen to the audiobook at any point where I could not physically read a book. For me, that is like when I'm lying in bed, when the lights are off, I'll play the audio then, or like if I'm driving, I'll play the audiobook then, or if I'm exercising, I'll listen to the audiobook. Some people can read physical books while they exercise. I am not one of those people. But those are 3 instances where I can't be reading the physical book, so I don't feel like I'm taking time away from new reading. So if you've read the Harry Potter series but you haven't listened to the audiobooks, you've got to listen to the audiobooks. If you've read like The Hate You Give but you haven't listened to the audio, you have got to listen to the audio. I'm telling you, it's the perfect way to revisit stories that you love. Another good one is to listen to audiobooks that are narrated by people that you enjoy. A lot of actors also do narrations for books. 2 examples I'll use is, remember when I was talking about The Raven Boys and how atmospheric it is? Will Patton actually narrated that. And if you don't know who that is, it's like the guy that played the coach in Remember the Titans. That's what I know him from. But he narrated it, and y'all, he did such a good job. And another audiobook that I literally listened to the audio even though I had the physical book was Shadow Shaper by Jose Older. That book is narrated by Anika Nani Rose, and if you don't know, Anika Nani Rose is the actor that does the voice for the Princess and the Frog, and she's also in Dreamgirls with Beyonce and Jennifer Hudson, and she's in Everything with Amanda Stenberg. Like, listen, Anika Nani Rose been out here doing it for a long time, but she did such an amazing job narrating the audiobook for Shadow Shaper, because that wasn't a book that I was like a huge fan of. It was like a 3-star read for me, but just the experience of listening to her narrate it on audio, I thought it was phenomenal. I loved it. So if there are certain actors that you really enjoy or people's voices that you enjoy, just Google and see if they've narrated any books, because you would be surprised by how many actors actually do voice work for audiobooks. Last but not least, my last suggestion, if you are reading or interested in a book that is set in a different culture, that might have different customs or languages, those are great to listen on audio. I know a lot of times I will be reading a story from the perspective of someone who has a different background than me. If they're talking in another language, it'll be like italicized or they'll have a footnote at the bottom. But if I am not versed in that culture, I don't always know how to pronounce those words, or I don't know like what voice to read the characters in my head. So I find that like listening to some of those books on audio make it so much easier. Like if I'm reading a book and it's told in the voice of someone that's Indian, or if I'm listening to reading a book and it's told in the perspective of someone that's Korean, whenever they're speaking the language in the book, it's so much easier to get in that character's head and not read from my own personal voice. So those are really, really, really good ones to listen to on audio as well. Those are my tips for what type of books to read on audio. I also really liked Time versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. That book was really good on audio, and that's one of the few contemporaries I've listened to on audio. What audio books have you guys listened to and loved? And leave it all in the comment section below. I absolutely love chatting with you guys. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at theBookArcher, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!